We're joined now by Oliver Dowden, who is the chair of the Conservative Party. Thank you so much for being
Morning, Sophie.
with us. We'll talk about Partygate in a moment, but first, just want to start, as so frequently we do in these weeks, on Ukraine. We're entering the third month of that conflict. It does feel that things are in a critical stage, with more Russian troops moving into the Donbass. Reports today of a mother and her 3-month-old baby killed in an airstrike in Odessa. Are we stepping up the support we're giving to Ukraine in terms of weapons?
Yes, we are, and your viewers will have seen the Prime Minister met with President Zelensky just last Saturday, at which he agreed a further 120 armoured vehicles to go to the Ukraine. That brings our support to almost £500 million worth of military support. So we're continuing to increase our support in terms of lethal military aid. And remember, we were pretty much the first major nation in the world to start doing that, and we've led the way, and other countries are doing the same, particularly the United States and others with whom the Prime Minister met this week. And of course, that sits alongside things like the further tightening of the sanctions regime as well.
Would you like to see other European countries doing a bit more? Germany, France?
Yes, I would. And I think we've had very positive noises from France and Germany, but I would like to see further action from them. It's actually heartening that the US is continuing to step up its support for the Ukraine. I think the military support has reached over £2 billion.
So it would be fair to say that you think that France and Germany are perhaps lagging behind the US and the UK in what they're doing?
Well, I would like to see more, but the Prime Minister is engaging on precisely that point. So earlier this week, he had a call not just with President Biden, but also President Macron and the leaders of other countries such as Germany. So I think there's a desire for us all to do it, but it would be good to see more from France and Germany as well, yeah.
One thing that we could also do more of in the UK is help for Ukrainian refugees, to making that visa scheme easier for people to get here quickly. There's a vigil in front of the Home Office later today by those who say that that process is too slow and complicated. Do you admit that things haven't perhaps been moving quite as quickly as you would have liked? And what is the current levels of the visas that we're seeing?
Well, it was an unprecedented situation and we had to move fast. And of course, we don't get everything right straight away. I think we're actually up to about 70,000 visas issued. And of course, you would expect, given that many European Union countries actually border the Ukraine, you'd expect to see more people going there.
Yeah, I mean,
but we are finding...
It's a bit of an understatement. What, 2.8 million in Poland, 70,000 in the UK? I mean...
Yes, well, because they border the Ukraine. But I think we are continuing to ramp up our actions. And indeed, just a few weeks ago, I met with Ukrainian refugees in my own constituency. I think British people have shown a real warmth, opening their doors. A good friend of mine, Rob Jenrick, has welcomed Ukrainian family into his family home.
He has said that it was a bit sluggish, effectively, the process, that there were delays.
Yes, and we accept that in this novel situation, we had to move quickly. But I am confident now, particularly under Richard Harrington, who is the new Refugees Minister. We're ramping up our efforts, we're getting the numbers up, and the United Kingdom is playing more and more of a part in doing so.
OK. While we're talking about refugees, I just wanted to ask you about the Home Secretary's comments in the Sunday Telegraph today. She was saying that criticism of the government's plan to send refugees to Rwanda is xenophobic. In her words, I was in Parliament on Tuesday and there are undercurrents, if I may say so, of just sheer xenophobia. For others who speak in disparaging, belittling and prejudicial, ignorant ways about a country that's our partner, quite frankly, it's offensive. Is she right?
Well, I think it's really important to understand the scale of the challenge that we face here.
But the question is it xenophobic?
Sophie, this is
xenophobia?
If you'll just forgive me for making this point, because this is a really important context to it. We've gone from about 300 people crossing the Channel illegally 2 years ago to 30,000 now. If we don't take action on this, then it's going to get much worse. That means criminal gangs are going to be enriched, and it means innocent people will lose their lives. So we don't relish doing this, but these are tough measures we have to take. And I think the Home Secretary's concern, and my concern, is that some elements of the media, and I'm not saying you, Sophie, are very happy to say there's a major problem with immigration. And then they're very happy to attack what the government is doing to try and tackle illegal migrants coming here in order to protect those illegal migrants without actually scrutinising what the alternative is. Because if we don't take action, the danger is more lives will be lost and more criminal gangs will be enriched.
So the question is, criticism of the government's plan to send refugees to Rwanda, is that xenophobic?
I don't think it's xenophobic to criticise the government's plans, but I do think that in terms of some of the media reaction to this is not accepting that A, action had to be taken, and B, I think that the situation in Rwanda is a country that is growing rapidly, and sometimes some of the views about Rwanda are outdated in that context.
OK. I'm keen to talk about Partygate as well, of course. Now, Boris Johnson faces an investigation now into whether he misled Parliament by saying no rules were broken over Partygate. If the Privileges Committee finds that the Prime Minister misled Parliament, should he resign?
Well, I don't believe the Prime Minister misled Parliament. I think it's perfectly open to the Privileges Committee to conduct that investigation, and Parliament consented to that happening. So I don't believe that scenario will arise.
OK, but if it does find that he misled Parliament, and that's, I would say, I'm sure you'll come back saying that's a hypothetical question, but the Privileges Committee is literally conducting an investigation into whether the Prime Minister misled Parliament over something he was fined for by the police. So I feel it's very legitimate. If they find he did mislead Parliament, should he resign?
Well, I think the Prime Minister is doing a really important job, whether that's what you saw in India this week in terms of agreeing the trade deal, continuing to tighten the pressure on the Ukraine. So I think there's a very, very strong case for the Prime Minister remaining in office. But as you alluded to, Sophie, you would expect me to say that it is a hypothetical scenario. So I'm not going to get into commentary on that. My focus, the Cabinet's focus, the Prime Minister's focus and the government's focus is on things like the deal with Rwanda, which is going to help tackle illegal boats crossing the channel. It is on the plan for jobs, for keeping unemployment down. And I just don't think it's helpful to do this. We have had lots of investigations. We'll have another investigation. We'll deal with the consequence of it when it arises. But really, my focus and our focus is on delivering, getting on with the job.
I get why your focus is on getting on with the job, because let's be frank, it's a pretty difficult position that you are in right now, isn't it? Sitting in the studio, in the words of your colleague, Conservative colleague William Ragg, you've been ordered to get out there and effectively defend the indefensible.
Well, I don't think I'm defending the indefensible. I do think that what happened in Downing Street was wrong. And I do think that people feel a great deal of legitimate hurt and anger over what happened. And therefore, I think it was right for the Prime Minister to apologise both on the day and come to Parliament in doing so. And I thought he explained the situation very well and did so with real sincerity. But equally, I've been spending the past 3 or 4 days travelling around the UK as part of the election campaign. And I have to say, the further you get away from London and Westminster, the more people are actually focused on saying, what can the government do for us? What are you doing to deliver, both nationally and indeed locally, where Conservative councils are costing you less and delivering more? And that's the kind of messages I've been focusing on, and people are responding positively.
Well, let's have a look now, shall we? Because I think we can just show you a poll of the public, their opinion on the Partygate scandal and their opinion on Boris Johnson as a result. Now, this is a YouGov poll. You can see there that 78% think Boris Johnson lied about the Downing Street parties, compared to just 8% who don't think he's lied, 14% who don't know. And that's actually around, including half of current Conservative supporters. That's got to be a big worry for you ahead of those local elections, hasn't it?
Well, of course, we're midterm anyway. They will be a challenging set of elections.
Nice expectation management there.
But nonetheless, I do think that we have really great Conservative councils that are delivering for people up and down the country.
And they've got to face the fact that 78%
they charge lower levels of council tax, and they deliver more, whether that's fixing the potholes, whether that's recycling. And I'm seeing a very positive response to our local councils. And that's what those elections are about. I think often people think that the national elections are really important, locals don't matter. Often locals have more influence over people's lives than the national elections
And they
do.
could also influence Boris Johnson's career, couldn't they? If it's a particularly bad set of results, then you'd expect more Conservative MPs to start getting a bit twitchy about whether he should lead your party into the next election. Do you think he will?
Yes, I do think he will lead us into the next election. I'll tell you why. Of course, and I've said before, I share people's frustration over what happened with parties, and the Prime Minister does as well. But I do think that needs to be balanced out, both against what has already been achieved, whether that's the vaccine programme, whether that's Ukraine or delivering Brexit, Prime Minister getting those big calls right, but also talking to the Prime Minister. He's got plenty more fuel in the tank. He's got real energy and determination to continue to serve this country and deal with some of the big challenges we face, whether that's levelling up or whether that's recovering from this global energy crisis and this national security crisis. And I think the uncertainty that would be caused by a change of leader would be dearly damaging to this country.
OK, I want to talk to you a bit about a country where they are changing leader, in France. Voters in France going to the polls later today. Marine Le Pen and Emmanuel Macron in that final runoff. If Marine Le Pen wins, will the UK be comfortable working with a leader from the far right?
Well, it's been a long-standing position of United Kingdom governments that we don't comment on ongoing democratic events in other countries, i.e. elections. And it's up to the French people to decide their leader. So I may have my own private views about each of them. I'm sure you can guess what I think about the respective candidates. However, I do think it's right for the French people to make that decision, and the British government will engage with the state of France, whomever leads it. OK, that does make sense. The polls suggest that Macron is on course to win. I think it's fair to say the relationship between Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron appears to have been quite strained recently. He was reported referring to Boris Johnson as a clown, saying it's sad to see such a great country with which we could do so much led by a clown. Do you think that's a relationship that needs a bit of TLC? Well, actually, I think Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron have a good working relationship. Emmanuel Macron's in the middle of an election campaign. I'm sure you don't lose votes in France by bashing the Brits and bashing British Prime Minister, particularly one whom has delivered Brexit successfully in the United Kingdom. I don't put much store by those comments. Actually, I see the way we're working together, whether that's in relation to defence and security in Ukraine, whether that's sanctions on Russia. Actually, they have a very productive working relationship.
OK, just a couple more stories that I'm keen to ask you about before we wrap up. Firstly, I just want to show you this page from the Mail on Sunday. This was in the Mail on Sunday. Hopefully we should be able to bring it to you. It is Angela Rayner in the Mail on Sunday. Not this one. OK, let's go for this one. It's OK, we'll keep this one on the screen. We're hopping around, running order slightly.
That's fine.
This is a letter from Jacob Rees-Mogg. This is what he left on the desks of civil servants. And it says, sorry you were out when I visited. I look forward to seeing you in the office very soon. With every good wish, Jacob Rees-Mogg. This is obviously part of his drive to get more people back in the office, to stop the civil service working from home. It's a bit passive-aggressive, isn't it?
I've never found Jacob Rees-Mogg passive-aggressive. First of all, I should say, I'd really like to pay tribute to our hard-working civil servants, and I saw that when I was Secretary of State for DCMS, dealing with an unprecedented situation of the collapse of the cultural and sporting sector caused by COVID. They worked tirelessly day and night to deliver solutions. And they did so working from home, as indeed I did. But the world has changed since then. As we learn to live with COVID, I think if we really want to serve the British people best, one of the things we need to do is have that collaboration, that kind of sharing ideas that comes from working in the office. So Jacob's efforts are driven by getting the very best value for taxpayers, and I support him in doing that. OK, well, let's bring the Angela Rayner image on to the screen if we can now. Now, this is a page in the Mail on Sunday today. Angela Rayner, of course, a deputy leader of the Labour Party. And the accusation here by the Mail on Sunday says that the Conservatives are accusing her of what they describe as a basic instinct ploy to distract Boris Johnson at Prime Minister's questions. It's pretty sexist, isn't it, looking at this? Well, I like the Mail on Sunday and I enjoy reading it, but I think this is a totally ludicrous story that I don't recognise in any way at all.
So what would you say to any Conservatives who are accusing of her of basic instinct ploy when she's literally just sitting across from the Prime Minister, as far as I'm aware, at Prime Minister's questions?
Well, as I say, I don't think I was in the chamber on the day that this happened, but it looks a completely ludicrous story, and I'd be pretty dismissive of it.
More seriously as well, 3 cabinet ministers and 2 shadow cabinet ministers reportedly facing allegations of sexual misconduct after being reported to the parliamentary watchdog. This is in the Sunday Times today, among, they say, 56 MPs who've been referred in total. I mean, how concerned are you, and what does it say about the culture at Westminster if this is happening?
Well, on the face of it, those look like concerning allegations, but I think you'd expect that due process should happen and that the investigation should be conducted. I personally know absolutely nothing about it, and you wouldn't expect me to. That would be a matter for House authorities.
Culture at Westminster. Do you think that Westminster is a safe place to be a woman?
Yes, I do think it's a safe place to be a woman. And I think actually we've made big improvements over the past 20 or 30 years. And some of the things that happened, I'm sure, when you were a young reporter and when I started out in Westminster, certainly wouldn't happen now. And I think that's something that has improved very much for the better.
OK, just finally, while I have you, you said in a speech back in February that woke ideology is a dangerous form of decadence. What exactly does that mean?
Well, what it means is, I think, I grew up under Thatcher and Churchill, and Thatcher and Reagan, forgive me, other generations.
Churchill, wow.
Churchill, that would be something I'd be particularly youthful looking. Other generations grew up under Roosevelt and Churchill. And we fundamentally believed that we were the good guys in history. We stood for freedom, speech, democracy, rule of law, and so on. I think this woke ideology turns out on its head and actually says...
What is woke?
Well, this is my point. This movement emanating, I think, beginning from the hard left, increasingly creeping more broadly, that says, actually, that's not the right narrative. The reality is our history is one of misogyny, of racism, of exploitation. And I think that's actually something that is profoundly corrosive. And I think the consequences of it are profoundly corrosive. For example, tearing down statues rather than contextualising them, trying to rename streets rather than give a context of our history. I think confident nations confront their history, but don't try and sort of rewrite our history. And that's what worries me about this ideology.
Some people would say that being woke is about caring about those things. It's about caring about the misogynism that we've literally just been talking about in Westminster when it comes to sexual harassment, when it comes to the way that women are portrayed in the media, when it comes to race as well. Surely that's something that we should care about.
Yes, of course we should, and I care passionately about it. Indeed, as chairman of the Conservative Party, I spend a lot of my time trying to encourage people from different backgrounds to enter the Conservative Party, to bring that kind of diversity. But actually, if you look, according to recent polling, for example, I think about 85% of black Britons oppose this kind of woke ideology that involves tearing down statues and so on. I don't see this as a dividing line in terms of race or gender. I think it's about a view of our nation, and I happen to be very proud of the history of this country, and I think most people whom I speak to share that view. It is this woke ideology is kind of a narrow worldview, but something I don't want to spread further.
OK, thank you very much for being on the programme today, Oliver Dowden. Thank you.